For 2 years, I watched Marcus Chen take credit for every single thing I created, every presentation, every client win, every innovative solution. My boss thought Marcus was a genius and I was dead weight. But what Marcus didn't know was that I'd been building a case against him, and the trap I set, it was so perfect that he walked right into it during the biggest meeting of his career. I need to take you back to my first day at Westfield Financial Solutions. I was 29, fresh off a promotion from my previous company, and ready to prove myself in corporate strategy. The office was everything you'd expect from a mid-sized financial firm. Open floor plan, glass-walled conference rooms, and that particular brand of fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look slightly unwell. My manager, David Patterson, seemed decent enough during the interview process. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, talked a lot about team culture and collaborative growth. I should have known that anyone who uses those phrases that often is usually compensating for something. Marcus Chen sat 3 desks away from me. He was 34, impeccably dressed, and had this way of commanding attention the moment he walked into any room. Within my first week, I noticed how everyone gravitated toward him. He remembered birthdays, brought coffee for the team, and always had a compliment ready. I thought I'd found my workplace best friend. "Hey, you're the new guy, right?" Marcus had said on my second day, sliding into the chair next to my desk. "David mentioned you've got some impressive ideas about our client retention strategies. I'd love to hear them sometime." I was flattered. Here was this clearly successful guy taking interest in my work. We started grabbing lunch together. He'd ask about my projects, my methodologies, my approaches to problem solving. I thought it was mentorship. It took me 3 months to realize what was actually happening. I'd been working on a comprehensive analysis of our underperforming accounts, staying late, running the numbers, developing a recovery strategy that I was genuinely proud of. The night before I planned to present it to David, Marcus stopped by my desk. "Still working on that analysis?" he asked, peering at my screen. "Mind if I take a look? I might have some suggestions." Stupidly, I emailed him my entire presentation. Just wanted feedback, collaborative growth and all that. The next morning, I walked into David's office ready to present, only to find Marcus already there. On the projector, my slides, my data, my strategy, with his name on every single page. "Ah, there you are," David said, barely glancing at me. Marcus was just walking me through his brilliant account recovery plan. Honestly, this is exactly the kind of initiative I've been hoping to see. I stood there, frozen. Marcus didn't even look at me, just kept clicking through my presentation like he'd built it from scratch. That's actually my work," I managed to say. David frowned. Marcus turned, and I'll never forget the look on his face. Concerned, sympathetic, like I was a child having a tantrum. "I think there might be some confusion," Marcus said gently. "We discussed some of these concepts at lunch, remember? Maybe you're thinking of that conversation." "No, I have the files. I created those slides last night." "Let's not do this here," David interrupted, clearly uncomfortable. "Marcus, great work. Let's implement this next quarter." I went back to my desk shaking. I pulled up my files to prove my case, but somehow the metadata had been altered. The creation date showed the files were made that same morning. Later, I'd learned that Marcus had remote access to our shared drive and knew exactly how to cover his tracks. This became the pattern. Every significant project I touched, Marcus found a way to claim. He'd schedule meetings with David before I could. He'd CC himself on emails and then forward them to leadership with additional thoughts that were actually my entire strategy. He'd casually mention my ideas in hallway conversations, planting seeds so that when I presented them formally, everyone thought I was copying him. The worst part? He was so good at it. Marcus never took everything. He'd let me have small wins, meaningless projects, just enough that I couldn't claim total theft. But anything that mattered, anything that could lead to a promotion or a raise or actual recognition, that belonged to Marcus. 6 months in, my performance review was devastating. "I'm concerned about your output," David said, not meeting my eyes. "When I hired you, I expected more innovation, more drive. Instead, I see someone coasting on basic tasks while team members like Marcus are pushing boundaries." I tried to explain. I had documentation, screenshots, email timestamps, but David had already made his mind. This sounds like professional jealousy, he said flatly. Marcus has been here 5 years. He's earned his reputation. I'd suggest you focus on your own work instead of worrying about his. I went to HR. I filed a formal complaint with everything I had. 2 weeks later, I was called into a meeting with David and an HR representative. Marcus was there too, looking wounded and confused. They'd investigated my claims and found them baseless. In fact, Marcus had generously declined to file a counter-complaint about my harassment. "We're giving you a written warning," the HR rep said. "Any further allegations without concrete proof will result in termination." Marcus caught me in the hallway afterwards. "Hey, no hard feelings, right?" He put his hand on my shoulder and I wanted to scream. "I know the pressure can get to people. If you ever need to talk, I'm here." That night, I seriously considered quitting. My girlfriend at the time told me I was becoming a different person, angry, paranoid, constantly venting about work. She wasn't wrong. Marcus Chen was living rent-free in my head and destroying me from the inside out. But I didn't quit. Instead, I started planning. I spent the next year becoming invisible. I stopped sharing ideas at lunch. I stopped sending drafts for feedback. I did my job adequately enough to stay employed, but held back anything exceptional. I let Marcus get comfortable, let him think he'd won. And I watched. I documented everything. I noticed Marcus always struck right before major presentations. He needed an audience for his brilliance. I noticed he favored certain file types, certain sharing methods. He had a pattern, and patterns can be exploited. By year 2, I had a plan. Our annual investor presentation was coming up, the biggest event on our calendar. David had been dropping hints that whoever impressed the board might be in line for a senior position opening up. I knew exactly who Marcus would target. I created 2 presentations. The first was real, solid, professional, but not spectacular. I saved it on the shared drive, where Marcus could easily access it. I even mentioned it casually in the break room, knowing word would get back to him. The second presentation was my actual masterpiece. Months of work, revolutionary analytics, projections that would make any investor weep with joy. This one I kept on an encrypted personal drive and worked on exclusively from my home computer. But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay, I need to pause here because this is the moment I'd been planning for an entire year. Subscribe if you think Marcus deserved what was coming, and drop a comment telling me, have you ever worked with someone who stole credit for your work? Because what happened in that boardroom, I still get chills thinking about it. Let me tell you exactly how it went down.
The week before the investor presentation, I made my move. I scheduled a meeting with David to discuss my ideas for the presentation. I was nervous, fidgety, acting exactly like someone who was trying too hard. I walked him through my decoy presentation, the mediocre one, and watched his face fall with disappointment. "This is fine," David said, clearly unimpressed, but I was hoping for something more innovative. I know, I said, letting my voice crack slightly. "I've been working on something else, something bigger, but it's not ready yet. Maybe I could have until Thursday to finish?" David agreed reluctantly. As I left his office, I saw Marcus watching from across the floor. He'd heard everything. I could practically see the wheels turning. That night, I stayed late, made a show of working intensely at my computer. Around 8, I accidentally left my screen unlocked while I went to the bathroom. When I came back, I noticed my chair had been slightly moved. My mouse was in a different position. Marcus had taken the bait. The next morning, Marcus requested an urgent meeting with David. I knew exactly what he was doing, presenting my decoy work as his own, trying to lock in his position before I could finish my bigger idea. But I'd planned for this. The decoy presentation had several carefully embedded errors, not obvious ones, subtle mistakes that would only become apparent under scrutiny, wrong calculations that seemed right at first glance, projections based on outdated data, a slide referencing a client we'd lost 6 months ago. Presentation day arrived. The boardroom was packed. 12 board members, our CEO, several VPs, and the entire senior leadership team. This was the meeting that determined our department's funding for the next fiscal year. The stakes couldn't have been higher. Marcus went first. He was charming, as always, clicking through the stolen presentation with confidence. I watched the board members nodding, smiling. David looked proud, like he'd personally discovered this brilliant strategist. Then the questions started. "This projection on slide 7, one of the board members said, frowning at her tablet. "The growth rate seems high. Can you walk us through the methodology?" I saw Marcus hesitate, just for a second, because he didn't know the methodology. He'd never built this, he'd just stolen it. "Of course," Marcus said smoothly, "we used a compound analysis of market trends combined with our historical performance data." "But your historical data references Q3 figures that don't match our actual Q3 numbers," another board member chimed in. "These seem to be from last year." The room shifted. David's smile faltered. "Additionally," a third board member added, "slide 12 references our Meridian account. We terminated that relationship in April. Why would they be included in next year's projections?" Marcus was sweating now, his perfect composure cracking. He started fumbling through explanations, contradicting himself, making it worse with every word. That's when David turned to me. "You said you had something else," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Something you were finishing. Is it ready?" I stood slowly, pulled out my personal laptop, connected to the projector. "Actually, yes, I completed it last night." What followed was the best presentation of my life. Every number was airtight, every projection backed by verifiable data. I walked them through innovative strategies they'd never considered, solutions to problems they didn't know they had. But I saved the best for last. "Before I finish," I said, "I want to address something. Over the past 2 years, I've noticed a pattern in our department. Ideas presented by certain individuals that seem remarkably similar to work being done by others. Timestamps that don't quite add up. Credit that flows in curious directions." I clicked to my final slide. It showed a timeline, every instance of my work being stolen, complete with original file metadata from my personal computer, timestamps, and email records that I'd kept backed up in 3 separate locations. "I didn't include this to be petty," I said. "I included it because intellectual property theft is a serious issue that affects team morale and productivity. I think the board deserves to know how ideas actually flow in this organization." The room was dead silent. Marcus's face had gone white. David looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The CEO was staring at my documentation with the intensity of someone doing very fast mental math about liability. "We'll need copies of all of that," the CEO said finally, "and I think we need to have a longer conversation about departmental oversight." The meeting ended shortly after. I was asked to stay behind. 3 weeks later, Marcus was terminated, not just for the presentation fiasco, but because my documentation triggered a full audit of his work history. Turns out I wasn't his only victim, just the one who'd built a case. David was reassigned to a regional office 3 states away. Officially, it was a lateral move. Everyone knew it was exile. As for me, I got the senior position, and the first thing I did was implement a new system for documenting and crediting collaborative work, clear paper trails, transparent processes. I made sure that what happened to me couldn't happen to anyone else on my team. 6 months later, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop near the office. He'd landed somewhere else, a smaller firm, lower position. He saw me, and for a moment, I thought he might try to talk. Instead, he just walked out. I sat there with my coffee and thought about those 2 years, the gaslighting, the warnings, the moments I'd almost believed I was crazy. And I realized the hardest part wasn't catching Marcus, it was trusting myself when everyone around me said I was wrong. If you're dealing with someone like Marcus right now, someone who steals your work and makes you feel invisible, I need you to hear this. Document everything, trust your gut, and be patient. Narcissists like Marcus always believe they're the smartest person in the room. That's exactly what makes them vulnerable. They never see the trap until they're already in it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. And if you've got your own workplace nightmare that you're ready to share, drop it in the comments or send it directly. Your story might be the next one featured. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next one.